Well, good morning. I may be upside down. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm not in reality upside down. I am just sitting at my sewing table. So this is where I disappear. I'm making a pair of men's underwear, and I thought I'd show you how I do them in case you would like to go ahead and make some as well. You can get the free pattern at freesewing.org. That's freesewing.org. Fantastic guy who developed a website where you input all of your personal measurements and then it creates a pattern exactly the right size for you. They do have lots of lovely patterns on there for all sorts of different things, and I can highly recommend this men's underwear pattern. And they look nice and they're really comfy as well. So I'm not going to hopefully take too much time. So let's get started. I've cut out all my pattern pieces already. I've got a waistband and my elastic. I've got the side fronts, which are a really peculiar shape and the most challenging part of putting this pattern together. That's the front, another peculiar shape, but you'll see how that works in a little bit. And there's two of those just to give it a little bit of extra strength. The guy on the website, Joost, is absolutely fabulous. He's so funny, and you'll see for yourself when you go and download it, his instructions and what he talks about, what's important in men's underwear. This is the back, or the bum section. That's the back. And then we've got two side pieces. The two side pieces are, this is a bit of fun. Hubby doesn't know this, so shh, okay? I am making these in pink, but tell him it's grey because he's so colourblind, he'll never know. And it'll be an amusing thing for me every time he wears them. I'm making these in a really fun colour and design. So there's your two side pieces. The first thing we're going to do is attach them to the back. So right sides together. I've got my back here and I've got my two side pieces. I'm going to attach this one onto the left. Now, however comfortable you are at whatever level you are, use pins or don't use pins, whatever you like. Just so you know, I'm sewing this today on my Baby Lock Eclipse overlocker, which, oh my goodness, I bought about a year ago. And I'm so in love with this machine. I can't tell you. I've had a Janome before that and another one which was a Janome branded something else that I got in South Africa about 40 years ago. And they worked okay. They're absolutely fine. But this is just such a dream. So I've got my right sides together, my front, side front and my back. So this is going to be pretty noisy, I'm afraid. I do need to change my needles. So apologies in advance for whenever I do overlocking and sewing, because the sound will be terrible. So just doing an overlocked stitch to join the back to the side. Now, don't think just because you don't have an overlocker, you can't make these. You can 100% make this and any ladies' lingerie that I've shown you in handmade on a regular sewing machine using zigzag stitch or the lightning stitch. It does look like a little lightning bolt. And those are designed specifically for stretchier fabrics. And that'll work perfectly, and I'll talk to you about that in a second when we move over to this, the sewing machine as well. Second side seam, joining the back and the sides together. I don't use pins. I just concentrate on the few inches of work directly in front of the presser foot and the knee. And I adjust them as they go. What I do, though, is I always join end of the seams together, just so that I know I haven't stretched one layer more than the other. So there we have it. Now we've got a much larger piece of the back and the two side seams. So we're going to put that down for a minute because we're going to do some extra stitching to secure those. And we're going to take our fronts and our side fronts. These are the peculiar pieces. What I'm going to do is, excuse this is just a lining. So you can use two of the same fabrics. I normally do that, but I happen to have one of these cut out already. So I'm going to use it as the lining for the front. Just gives more security, makes them feel more comfortable apparently. And I'm not a boy, I wouldn't know. Ask your hubby when you've made his pair what he thinks. So that is my front, and they are just laid together. Doesn't matter as long as your good side or your right side is facing upwards. I now take my two pieces that are for the side fronts, and I just place them there because that's where they are going to go. They're going to go in this gap here. You can see that's a clue. You've got this arc here on your lining, on your side piece front, and you've got an arc here on your front piece, and those two are going to eventually be joined together. It looks impossible, but honestly it's fine. So what you can do is you take this one, put it there so that they join up, flip this one over and just join the point of the seam here. I'm only going to put a pin in it because you're here and I'm showing you how. I now follow the seam, the curve, and I get to the point, and I take that point and I place it onto the bottom of the front seam there, and I can put a pin in there. Now this curved seam, we've got a convex and we've got a concave. So if you remember from geography, convex is outwards, concave is inwards, and you remember that because caves are inwards. So we are going to just ease the two layers together. I generally do this directly on the machine, but because you're here today, I'm going to do this with you with pins. I'm going to flip it over. And the only reason I'm doing that is because I do prefer the convex piece to be on the underside, nearer the base of the sewing machine. And also, for today, it happens to be a lighter colour, which will make it much easier for you to see what's going on. Guys, this is not meant to be a full-blown tutorial. That's for when we meet up in Handmade down at the edge again in Wigan, some point in the hopefully not too distant future, with the vaccines for COVID now being rolled out across the UK. So we've got to stretch the one and not stretch the side pieces, because otherwise it will not fit. There you go. I'm getting there slowly. Put those two together there. I'm going to ease this down a little bit more, remove my pins just because I haven't got this quite right. Take that pin back out, start over here, stretch the top layer, which is my front. Don't stretch the side pieces. This is always the fiddliest bit of anything. This is a bit like setting in sleeves and things, because you've got one piece that's a different shape to the other, and it can be challenging to get them right. So there you go. That feels a lot better. I've eased the extra fabric across that curve now. So there you go. I've got my two together. I'm going to go over to the overlocker and overlock those quickly for you. Keep your fabric underneath nice and smooth and out of the way so you don't sew anything you shouldn't be sewing. as I said, just concentrate on the little bit of fabric that's right in front of you while you're doing this, because it doesn't feel as overwhelming. Because it can be pretty scary in the beginning. What I tell people who ask is, for your first couple of pairs, just grab an old t-shirt. Cut up an old t-shirt and use that. So there I've got my seam sewn now on the overlocker, and you can see it's now starting to look more like a front, because actually we have a bit of a straight seam there. So we're now going to repeat that on the other side. I'm going to just line up my two pieces, and I'm going to put this where it belongs, so I can visually in my brain remind myself what I'm doing. Flip this up, put it, line the seam up, and I'm going to take it straight to the machine and do it as I go. Little bit, you can hear I've stopped, and that's to give me time to now stretch the top layer, which is the front. Stop after an inch or so, and I then curve it as I'm going, so it's straight under the needles. There you go. And then when I've done that curve bit, I go and I marry up the two parts of the end of the seam, and I check that I don't have too much or too little fabric on one or other seam, and I will just ease the two together. And that's why I find it so much easier, because I can do it on the fly. So we've done that. We now have the front. We are going to right sides together, close up this V now. So we bring those two together to the point, okay, and I'm now going to take that to the overlocker, and I'm going to stitch from there down to the end. Because it's a double layer of fabric, that means you're going to have 4 pieces of fabric right sides together. And you can hear the machine changes the way it sounds because of the extra layers. So we've now got our front is now ready. What we're going to do next is join the front to the back. So make sure you've got it the right way up. I try and work as if you're wearing them. You know what I mean? I have the legs downwards and the waist upwards, and that in my brain then I know I've got both pieces the right way, so the legs are dangling down, and I know I'm not going to get myself confused. So push. I've changed my mind, guys. I'm not going to do this, and I'll show you why. I'm going to take this front, and because we've got a seam here at the front where we've joined the two colors, what I want to do is I want to push the seam downwards towards the legs, but I don't want it to move. I want them to be nice and secure. So I'm going to go and run a row of a zigzag stitch on my sewing machine all the way down these seams. I'll show you that when I'm done. So I'm going over to my sewing machine. Just so you know, my sewing machine has got a stretch needle in it, or a knit needle, or a super stretch, or microtex, something along those lines. I've got my Gutermann polyester thread in, and I've changed this machine because you can adjust this machine. I've changed the machine setting so that it's on stretch fabric, medium weight. Now most machines don't have that ability, so don't worry about it, just use your machine as it comes. So push your seam that you've made on the overlocker down towards the leg, and sew your zigzag so that it pushes that seam down and it keeps it in place. you don't want your underwear to rub against your skin. And that's one of the reasons we do the seam. I'm now going to repeat that on the other side. Seam. I keep forgetting all my different machines. This Husqvarna, I don't actually have a lever for the presser foot. When you put your foot down to sew, it lowers the presser foot for you. And honestly, I never remember that after I've been sewing on my older machines. It also nicely has a thread cutting option. Just going to trim off these ends from the overlocker. And you may not see this from the outside, from the right side, but from the wrong side, you can now see I've anchored down that seam, which is now much nicer looking and much stronger. While I'm at it, I'm also going to take this seam here, the center crotch seam, and I'm going to zigzag that flat, because honestly I cannot imagine how uncomfortable underwear would be if that seam kept rubbing against your sensitive bits. So all I'm doing is zigzagging up towards the point, and then I am going to do a little bit of a reverse when I figure out where the reverse is on this machine. Oh, there it is. And then I'm going to fix the stitches and cut it off. So that one you will be able to see now because it's on the right side. So I've now stitched that V shape flat. That won't rub against your skin. So now I will join the front and the back together. So let's do that again. Take one side of your back piece that is now joined to the side and line up your front to that. Take it over to the overlocker and join the two up. So the top section, you will have 2 layers at the center front because that was a double layer. Remember, we spoke about that. We spoke about the double layer at the top. But at the bottom of the leg section, it is only a single layer for each front and a back, so a double layer. So now I've got that. I'm now going to repeat that exercise we did on the front with the zigzag on the regular machine for all of my flat seams. So I'm going to do that by pushing my seams towards the leg or the center or the side of my body. And we're just going to flatten the seam out. If you have a cover stitch machine, this will work really well. And it will allow you to make a nice decorative feature out of this. But I think the zigzag looks really nice as well. And honestly, I'm just too lazy to take the cover stitch machine out right now. So that's what we're going with. We're going with a decorative zigzag stitch instead. So that's the one side seam flattened. I'm now going to turn the other half of the side down towards the hip area, and we are zigzagging all the way along there. While you're working, remember to keep pushing your seam to the side you're sewing it on, because what you're trying to do is make this seam from the overlocker lie flat. That's the one side of the garment done. we're going to repeat that on the other side. But bear in mind, at the moment, I only have one side seam closed. The reason is I only closed up one side seam is because it's just easier on the sewing machine to lie it flat while you're doing all of this cover stitch or zigzag stitching. And then I'll go and I'll close the underwear up completely. There you go. So we have one long piece now, and we're going to join it by doing right sides together and joining the final side front seam on the overlocker. Then we'll come and stitch that with the zigzag. Alright. Remember, join your sides together, then grab the points at the end, check that they're the same length, they lie perfectly on top of each other. And then cut that off. Okie doke, so they are starting to look like a pair of underpants now. There you go, let me show you more or less what we have. Final seam on the side now, I'm going to zigzag that down. On the sewing machine, flatten it, and now because you've got a tube, make sure you keep looking underneath your fabric that you're sewing to make sure you haven't got any fabric from the rest of your garment stuck under there. Do you know how I know all of these things? Because I've made all of these mistakes myself. And some days I continue to make some of these mistakes still when I'm not concentrating, or I'm too tired, or I'm in pain or something like that. Right, so there we have them joined together. Now we're going to turn them to the wrong side, outwards. And we are going to join the inner leg seam, or the crotch seam, or no, this is the inner leg, because this is the bit that runs from one thigh to the other thigh. So I'm just going to trim this so it's not as shallow. And there we go. So we take our fabric, we lie our garment down. You can now see you've got a pair of legs, and you're going to join these two together. Guys, I've just spotted that there are a couple of you on here. I'm sorry I can't say hello to you individually, because I actually cannot read the screen right now. So this is the curved inner leg. So I've started the seam off. I'm now going to join up the opposite leg, and I'm going to lie one piece on top of the other and sew the inner leg together. This is another one of those seams that it's really important that we stitch down with zigzag, because you can imagine that would chafe so badly on your thighs if you didn't. So take that over to the machine. I'm going to turn them back the right way around. Hey, we have a pair of undies. They are fab. Seriously, these are going to make me smile every time my husband wears them. Shh, remember, they're grey. They're not pink. So push the seam to the back or the bum, and you're going to sew through the leg hole on the one side. Get it started. Zigzag and flatten your seam. Now you're going to go through the opposite leg hole and you're going to peek inside through to the bed of your sewing machine to make sure there's no fabric in the wrong place that you're going to sew over by mistake. So just do a few little centimeters or so in front of you each at a time, and then just push the fabric to the sides. And then you will have flattened your seam, and you'd also strengthen it. Because this is the seam that will take the most wear on a pair of underwear, whether that's ladies' lingerie or men's boxers. So we now have that. You won't be able to see it, sorry, because of the color, but on the inside you can see now that this is tacked down completely, and it's nice and flat and comfy. While I'm on this section, as I said, a cover lock stitch is great if you have one and you're not lazy like me to take it out and use it. I literally zigzag everything. So I'm going to put a hem in the bottom of these boxes while I'm at this sewing machine. All I'm doing is checking that there's no bits that are longer, one longer than the other. Make sure that they're nice. And I turn under about 1 centimeter or so. And I start at the inner thigh or the inner leg, fold it under, and I zigzag all the way around. A bit at a time, folding under and sewing. I do this from the right side and on the right side, so I can see what I'm doing on the public side of the garment, not the private side of the garment. And also because I don't know what it is, sewing machines, I've yet to find a sewing machine that actually sews exactly the same from the top and the bottom. And I prefer the way stitches look when I sew it from the top, the right side, the needle side. Right, there we go. So we're coming back to the beginning. I'm just going to go over my existing stitches and then back and forward tack it into place so that we don't have the seam unraveling on us. What I'll probably do, guys, is when I'm finished here, I will respond to anybody who's got any questions or wants to ask me anything. But if you've arrived late to the sew-along, I'm making a pair of men's boxes for the hubster, obviously. He's the only person we really see nowadays anyway. My other boys are too far away. And this is a freesewing.org pattern, which is absolutely lovely. And you can have it made in exactly the same size that you like. In fact, you know, honestly, these are so nice. I would wear them. I would just change that little front panel so it was flat. Because at the end of the day, ladies don't need that extra pouch at the front that the blokes need. But you could wear these as boy shorts. And Christine, if you're on there, Cody would love you if you made him these. I cannot tell you how comfortable they are. So we're doing the leg hem on the other side now. Nearly finished, coming up to the start. And I'm going to do a bit of backward tacking and snip my threads. Right, so we have hems. We have only one thing left to do, and this is where you've got options. If you have lovely soft elastic for the waistband, you can actually just sew the waistband straight on. So there's the seam around the hem of these. They're not baggy at all, by the way. These are snug fitting boxes. And they fit snugly around the leg because you measure yourself and you input your measurements and it downloads a pattern that's exactly right for your size. Then you will find they will fit perfectly. I say that. They should fit perfectly, but you do need to be aware of choosing the right fabric so that they've got a decent amount of stretch in them, because otherwise they won't get over your bum. Right, we are ready for the final little bit of this, and that's the elastic band. So the waistband on these is going to be covered, and the reason I cover them is because my hubby loves covered waistbands because they're so much more comfortable. I also have this lovely elastic, which is very soft actually, and would be fine to just zigzag straight onto the top for the waist. But in this case, I'm going to cover them. So I've cut a long strip, which is twice the width of the elastic. I'm going to lie these down, and I'm going to just check that I've made them this long enough. I want the waistband to just be about a centimetre or so smaller, which this is. So that's absolutely spot on. I'm going to right sides together. Whoops, now you see what I just did. Wrong foot. My left foot is operating the overlocker, and my right foot's operating the sewing machine, and I've tried to set up the sewing machine. I've made a tube now from my waistband. Okay, I'm going to add my elastic, which is going to be the same size as this. So I'm going to roll off my elastic times 2. And I'm going to join that on the sewing machine. Let me just put this away. Oh, I've just been summoned for breakfast. Isn't that lovely? The hubster, who's not seen his grey undies, has just told me to come for breakfast. So I'd better get a shifty, eh? So I've joined my elastic into a circle as well, just with a row of zigzag stitches. I'm going to pop it on top of my waistband, just so that a little bit sticks out each side. And I'm going to take that section, because it's got the join in it, and I'm going to attach that to the back of the underpants at the back sort of center line. I never measure this, guys. I just put the elastic waistband, the new waistband, on top of the waist, and I come over to my overlocker, and I will start to stitch it down. Let's get the right foot pedal this time. Once I've got it anchored with a few stitches, I then do what we did on the other thing, a few centimeters at a time. I wrap the fabric around the elastic. I line it up with a very gentle stretch to the body, and I stitch it together, all 3 layers. Now, this is probably the trickiest bit, and you will get better at it as you practice. What I'm doing is I'm actually stitching the elastic through with the seam. It's actually being stitched to the body, because I tell you, there's probably nothing more annoying than your waistband elastic shifting round and twisting, and by stitching it down in your seam, you're avoiding that, because then the elastic can't actually twist. Keep going all the way around the underpants or underwear, under boxes. I don't know, everybody seems to call it something different. Just don't call trousers pants, according to my grandchildren in London, because the pants are underpants. The minefield. Right, and sometimes I'm lucky. Sometimes, like today, I'm not so good at it. I've made the waistband. I haven't stretched it evenly all the way around. So I'm going to have a little bit more gathering at the back of these boxes than I would at the front. When I get all the way around, I just go over. Then you can see what I mean. There's a bit too much gathering in there, but you won't see that when you're wearing them. And the front is nice and flat. Final thing, I'm going to stitch down all the way around the same way with a zigzag that we did on the rest of the garment to get the seam at the waistband flat. Now, if you're doing it with just elastic and no casing, this is an extra step that you can cut out. You don't want the seam sticking up. It'll rub against your stomach and your waist and it'll just be irritating. So I don't know how long that's taken us. It takes me a bit longer when I'm chatting and doing it. But generally, it doesn't take me more than 20 minutes or so to make a pair of these. If I've got all the pieces cut out already, and cutting out doesn't take long if you do what I do and make sort of 6 or 7 pairs at the same time. So I'm coming back to the beginning. I'm just going to run over the start-up stitches and I'm going to do a bit of a reverse and snip it off. And that, as they say, is that one pair of men's boxes. So I'll add a photograph to the video as well so that you can see them, and I'll put them on Instagram or something as well. So there they are, a really, really nice, comfy pair of very unique designer underwear. So I'll answer some questions for you later. If you've got any, pop them in the comments. Share the video if you want to. And maybe we can make these when we meet up again in Handmade soon. Love you all. Take care. Bye.